love and grief go hand in hand. And so when we allow ourselves to really feel and express, like don't hold it in, but like actually express, allow it to go out and to be transformed. You know, our earth mother, if you ask for permission and like connect with like in a good way, you can ask for her support to hold, to transform. Like she's the ultimate transformer of energy.
Welcome to Holistic Healing Podcast. I'm your host, Luam, and today I'm joined by Natalie Zacharias. She is the creator of Tending Your Spirits. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Glad to have you here. Can you give us a little background on what you do and how you ended up on this path?
Sure. So, my name is Natalie, and I um, do one on one healing work with people virtually. I'm a certified emotion code practitioner. I also do one on one transformational coaching sessions that are informed by the spiritual initiations I've gone through, as well as my training in Gestalt therapy and the masters that I have in counseling psychology and integral counseling psychology.
Mm.
And I'm also a priestess, and I do ritual and ceremonies to support the ancestors, to support space for grief, to the transformation of grief, supporting the transformation of conflict, and healing for community. And so those are some of the many things that I do out in the world. I do ceremonies online, in person, um, do trainings with my friend Liv Wheeler, who's the creator of Earth's Amulet. We have a lot of collaborations that we do together. And yeah,
How did
I'm a
you
priestess in devotion to the harmony, like the anchoring of harmony into this realm.
mm, how did you get on this line of work?
Well, that's a great question. I was very stubborn when I was younger. I was in denial for of the gifts that they naturally hold in my life, and I feel like spirit, my guides, my guardians, my ancestors, they kind of like clobbered me on the head of like, stop pretending that you're sleeping. You're not asleep.
Yeah.
You know you're here for purpose. You have purpose and gifts to share. And I kept getting this like very strong, well, let me say it more like directly. I was working in the corporate world for 6 years, and I had this like deep feeling in my gut of like, this is where I was supposed to be at that time. Like, that wasn't a bad choice. It was very much like spirit told me, apply for this job, go here.
Mhm.
But there was this feeling of like, okay, the winds are changing now. Your chap, like your direction is shifting. You're here for a time. Don't get comfortable because this is not where you're supposed to be forever. And very clearly could see, like looking at people around, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm like, everyone's so unhappy. There's not like, it felt like there was just like this energy of contraction that I noticed around me. And this uneasiness, this like restlessness, excuse me, this restlessness within me. And I kept feeling this urge, like I was working with attorneys at the time, and I would, go into an attorney's office to help with like a project or something,
Mm.
and like leave an hour later, having held space as a therapist, basically, for them to process emotional things that were happening in their lives. And they just kept happening over and over again. And I realized, I'm like, I really should get paid for this. I'm giving like free sessions for the people that I'm working with. And and so then I started being curious about like going back to school and getting my master's in psychology. But at the time, at that point in my life, I realized that spirituality was such an important part of my life. And I saw the ways that traditional psychology negated that.
Mhm.
And for me, if I was going to go into that world, it needed to be complementary to the spiritual awakening that I was starting to experience. And so I was looking for programs that integrated, wove with, um, made space for spirituality to have its breath within psychology. And I remember like having this very dramatic moment talking to my mom's best friend who was a school counselor. I'm like, there has to be a way that psychology and spirituality like work together and that you can study that. And she's like, yeah, honey, there is. There's this thing called holistic psychology or transpersonal psychology. And there's actually programs that you can apply for that like have this. And I was like, oh, okay, good. I'm glad that exists. And so then I applied to a bunch of programs. And uh, when I went to go look at the schools, when I went to San Francisco to see the California Institute of Integral Studies, when I was there, I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. Just like feeling like that same feeling that I got when I applied for that job 6 years ago of like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. I had that same experience um, when I landed in San Francisco and I got to see the school and really just feel the energy, like the soul of the school. Like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. And so then I quit my job, like sold my car, sold all my stuff, and moved out to like one of the most expensive places to live in this country. And, figured it out, like figured out how to, go to school and unbeknownst to me, this whole other realm outside of grad school opened up, and I started to be introduced to plant medicines and indigenous elders and uh, so many different forms of healing that just I wasn't going to get taught in the school, but somehow like complemented what I was being taught. Like I would be learning about trauma and then have like a very lived experience with a community house that I was living in of how trauma was showing up and how people's nervous systems were dysregulated and then I would have this when I was taking my Gestalt therapy class, learning about different parts and parts work. And then I'd sit in a plant medicine ceremony and have like a very visceral experience of seeing the different parts of me that existed that were coming up when things were happening in my life. So it's been a very uh, interesting journey, to say the least.
Yeah.
That span of time I was in San Francisco felt like 50 years of life because of like the so much of what I was learning in that space. It was just like a constant like death and rebirth, death and rebirth, death and rebirth, which I needed. I needed that. I needed to learn in that way and to really remember who I was. And before going out to California, I was a people pleaser and just a very wounded person who didn't know. I didn't know my worth. I didn't know who I was. I felt like I was like apologizing for existing. And then through those many initiations I went through, and there were a lot, it just really like, oh no, there's nothing wrong with me. Like it's okay to exist how I am. It's okay to be a strong energy, to be like a lot. There's nothing wrong with being sensitive. There's nothing wrong. I'm here. This is who I am. And I feel that like multiple experiences that I had there that allowed for a return to center has informed the way that I've been a lot like able to hold space for others. Because I feel like with any healer, you do have to have your personal healing work. You have to continuously look at your blind spots and um, do your shadow work and um, continue to explore the subconscious to see what's there, because that's only going to inform the way that you're able to hold space for others and like your capacity to hold that. And so, yeah, that was a big answer for your question.
It's kind of shocking listening to your story, how much similarities that we have. Um, I was also, as a kid, I used to pick up psychology books because I was so fascinated with it. And, I used to hold that safe space for people and be their little therapist. But I didn't know there was a connection between spirituality and psychology, at least from an academic standpoint. So that's kind of interesting. But so I've
Yeah, it's
never,
interesting because my teachers,
no, go ahead.
sorry, there was no, one of my teachers who was a very, I wouldn't say she's a spirit, like a traditional spiritual person, like as one thinks of. Like she was very much like uh, analytical woman. That's the way that she operated through the world, and kind of a curmudgeon too. Kind of when I think about her, I'm like I have so much love for her because she was just a grumpy old lady. But I remember she was teaching about I forget what class that she taught, but she broke down the word psychology, and psyche means soul, and we forget that. But psychology, when it's broken down, is the study of the soul,
Yeah. And it's
and that's
good in
interesting. Like when you,
any healing work to understand the psychology because a lot of things that you're helping people with is either emotional damage or mental, and those things are important.
yeah,
Um, Even with yourself, your healing journey is going to coincide with your gifts evolving, whatever your gifts are,
mm-hmm.
so that you can actually help people a lot better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So
yeah.
I've never heard of emotional code practitioner.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So the emotion code is a energy healing modality that was founded by Dr. Bradley Nelson. He actually has a few other ones, a few other modalities, but the emotion code specifically focuses on trapped emotions and like you through the lens of energy. So it's like trapped energy that's in our body that are attached to emotions. And so um, as many people know, like, or maybe many people don't know, that we have different energy bodies. Like, we have our
Mhm.
physical body, the causal body, the astral body, the emotional body. There's a few more. I just can't, in the top of my head, think of them. Um, and the trapped emotions, they can be from things we've experienced in our lives. They can be, if you were a person who doesn't have very clear boundaries, they can be like emotions that you picked up from other people,
Yeah.
um, which a lot of people who I feel are like healers or highly sensitive people, they tend to like absorb other people's
Yeah.
emotions. I think also we have this like subconscious program that like, oh, if I'm an empath, and that means I absorb, and I don't. That's not true. I feel like that's like a lie that we've been told,
Really?
and so therefore we believe it. Well, it can we can do that, but we're in some form we're consciously choosing that too, and that's why it's important to have boundaries. Like
Mm.
uh, one of my teachers, my Gestalt teachers, he framed boundaries in a way that really helped me understand it on many levels.
Mm.
I used to think of boundaries as like the wall that I put up as like a protective force, like you shall not pass,
Mm.
like that kind of energy. Where he says, and which resonates for me now, is boundaries are the place where we choose to meet the world. So like if I have a lot of space in my being, perhaps my boundaries will be like, I don't know, 3 feet away from my body, which is a
Mhm.
lot bigger than my handstand, you know?
Yeah.
And then maybe in the next moment, I kind of feel a bit more tender and my boundaries may be a little bit closer. I'm like, oh, I just don't really want to have that, like, you know? I
Mm.
get to choose because I'm always changing. I'm not like a stuck thing. I'm not a thing. I'm a multidimensional, ever moving being.
Yeah.
And so that in any moment, I can choose, like, how do I want to meet the world? Do I
Mm.
need a lot of space? Do I want to be a little bit closer? Do I actually just need like leave me alone, everyone? Go into like my bed and just be in the fetal position? And there's nothing wrong with it. You can have boundaries, however. So when you look at the lens of like energy, we can have boundaries with those that are around us energetically. That maybe we have a bit more spaciousness. Maybe we have a little bit, maybe a little bit like stay further back. And with empaths, we've always been told that like, oh, our job is to, I mean, not that we've been told that, but I feel like a belief that a lot of empaths have is that like, oh, I'm an empath, I feel deeply and I like feel everyone else's thing. And I feel uh, that's a being an empath with an unbalanced way of being an empath. because we're taking on other people's things. And I see it all the time with, clients that come with the emotion code, like to get support. They've taken on other people's stuff, and that wears on a person. So the emotion code, it can be trapped emotions from your lifetime. It could be when you were in your mother's womb, things that she experienced because you were emerged when you were in your mother's womb. Um, there's inherited trapped emotions that we have, things that we inherited from our parents at the moment of conception, which those are always fascinating because they clear the trapped energy from like person, from the parent, and anyone in that lineage that like going back to the first person who experienced that, let's say trauma for lack of a better word, that created that inherited trapped emotion that got passed down. Which is interesting if you're familiar with epigenetics. Epigenetics studies how trauma gets passed down in the DNA.
Yeah.
They also like resiliency as well, but it's looking at epigenetics and an energetic lens of like, okay, this is the trapped emotion that got passed down through the lineage. And then there's what's it called? Psychic traumas, which is more than one emotion gets trapped at a time. So for me, they look like clusters, like trapped emotions that tend to, like the way that Dr. Nelson teaches it, it's like a bubble. Like they look like bubbles. And so like a psychic trauma looks like, when you blow bubbles and there's like 2 bubbles attached or 3 or 4, that's what they look like when I close my eyes, and that's what it looks like. And then there's preconception. So these are trapped emotions from past lives that, we've incarnated many different times. And so maybe it's something we brought into this lifetime from a past life. And so it's really fascinating to see the types of things that come up for people when, emotion code can be used. I mean, my intro to emotion code, I was having like, out of nowhere, my back was like cramping up really badly. And I was in it was like a 7-day training with ancestral healing. That was like the training was to help people how to help the ancestors. And one of the workshops or ceremonies that we were doing was an intro to the emotion code. And I really wanted to learn about it, but I could not sit up. Like I really was like in pain. And so I was like laying on my belly on the couch, and I like told the teacher, I was like, I'm so sorry. I cannot participate. Like I'm just in so much pain. And she's like, no, just sit here and just like listen, and you're fine. I was like, okay. And later at one point when everyone was working, on each other, she came over to me. She's like, do you want me to see if there's any trapped emotions? I was like, yes, please. I'm like, anything. I'm like, this pain is weird, came out of nowhere, and it hurts so much. So I was just laying there, and she started, I don't even remember what she cleared, but the way that Dr. Nelson teaches it, you use magnets to like physically clear from the body. And so that's really, it's because you're telling the subconscious, like, this is the tool that I'm going to use to clear this energy from the body. Like that's what you're telling the subconscious. So the subconscious is in agreement with like, yes, this is the tool that we're going to use to clear this energy from the body. And so then with the magnet, which was like, it was a magnet that you use to like post something on your refrigerator. It wasn't a fancy, like, $100 magnet. It was just a very simple magnet for the fridge that was used. And I remember she was, tuning into my subconscious and seeing what emotions were coming up. And as she was clearing it, I can feel in my spine, it felt like, do you remember that toy Etch and Sketch?
Yeah.
It's like a screen, and it has like a thing, and it has like filaments of magnets in it.
Yeah.
You can like draw with it. In my mind's eye, I can see those like filaments getting pulled out of my spine. And she must have cleared, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 trapped emotions, and the pain went away. And then I was suddenly able to like sit up, and I like drank water, and I was like, whoa, like what is that?
That is a crazy
seen that
concept.
before. I've, you know, What'd you say?
That is a crazy concept, how you can clear someone else's emotion. I'm one of those
Yeah, I mean, the
empaths.
subconscious is like, you know,
Yeah. I'm one of those empaths that do pick up on emotions and other people's emotion, or I did. And sometimes I still do.
yeah,
But I've learned how to alchemize it. And well, first I had to learn what's mine and what's when I am doing those things.
yeah,
But it took some time, and then I've learned how to alchemize that energy and draw boundaries. But
yeah.
drawing boundaries, it's even hard for me to explain how you even do that because I do that with my mind or my imagination, or I feel like it's my emotional body, or it's something that is not the physical vessel that just helps me do that. But you talked about, having control over the dimensions of your space. Can you explain that a little bit? Like, how do you begin to draw boundaries and control your space?
Well, I think what you were just describing of like really understanding what's mine and what's not. Because listen, I'm an empath as well. And as much as I know, I'm not as um, porous as I once used to be, right? Because I've learned a lot of practices and gone through a lot of things to have like taught me that that's not sustainable. Basically, is what I was being taught, or what I've learned. Um, I still have those practices. Like sometimes I go through experiences because I'm human. I still have wounds that need healing and things that still trigger me. So those sometimes can be like things that like latch on, like energies can latch on to our wounds. And so it's very much like a continuous practice for me of like, um, it's like meditation in living, like walking meditation in a way, you know, of like feeling into my being, like grounding myself to the earth. That's what helps me. Like my process to ground myself into the earth, connect with my higher self, like close my eyes or lower my gaze and just feel into my field and just noticing like a body scan. I'm a very like clairsentience is something that I've just that's a gift that I've had all my life. So I just feel really into like my physical being of like where am I noticing any contraction, and then like following that curiosity of and not judgment because that's a whole other thing. Curiosity is what I go with. So being curious of like all right, noticing like oh I feel a little bit of a contraction in like my stomach area. Okay, that's my solar plexus chakra. Let's explore further. Like what's here? Is this my energy? Is this a wound coming up for me? Like did something trigger me? Is this an energy that from an outside, like not my physical or spiritual self, like something outside of me, you know? Um, the thing that comes to mind is like an energy dart. Because unfortunately, like that happens. Like people consciously or unconsciously throw energy at other people. And so just really just being clear of like what's mine, what's not mine. Um, I use a pendulum, like I have a pendulum with me all the time. It's a tool that I've learned how to use this tool as a way to connect with my higher self or higher intelligence, um, intuition. There's so many different words to use, like higher soul self. I've learned how to use the pendulum to ask yes or no questions to get a clear answer of what I'm sensing. And so I'll ask questions like, is this mine? Is this not mine? Can I clear this with the emotion code? Can I clear this with Reiki? Do I need to work with a different practitioner? I have like a list of practitioners that are like my go-to when my own tools are not uh, what's going to help clear whatever is in my field. And it's like a constant like coming back to center to see like okay what's happening here. And I'm describing it in this way, but and it may sound like very like, oh man, that's a lot of work, but it really isn't. Not, it's there's a way that I've integrated that into life, that it's not like it's just like going to boil some water and make myself some tea. It's just as easeful as that. But, so we go through life and we experience things throughout the day that bring stuff up to the surface for us. And we have an opportunity whenever we have an experience to feel into like, well, what, you know, uh, before, if I've had an experience that was triggering, I may feel like, oh, why this person do this to me, or get really caught up in like the story of it. And now I've realized like, well, anything that's going to bring up something to the surface for me is an opportunity to heal, to transform, to learn more about like life and about myself and about maybe wounds that I didn't know were there that are coming to the surface to be transformed. And I feel like that's that bit about it's just a practice of like, uh, consciously choosing how you want to walk in the world. You can consciously choose to ignore everything. That's a choice. Or you can consciously choose to like actively transform what comes. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
comes up when you ask.
And sometimes it's collective. I think everyone experiences collective grief, things like
Oh
war,
yeah.
social
Oh yeah.
injustice, things like that, that people don't realize affects their own healing, their own emotional state, their frequency on a daily basis, especially if you're
Absolutely.
tuning into the news and things like that. How can people
Absolutely.
begin to separate, still care about these things, but at the same
Yeah.
time separate it from their own emotion and their own healing journeys?
That's a great question because you don't want to be ignorant to what's happening out in the world, right? You also don't want to get caught up in like the feels like a tidal wave, like when the collective gets like agitated about something, it's like it's like run for cover, tsunami's coming.
Yeah.
Um, I feel like, well, this is what I do. First off, I don't listen to the news because I'm aware that the energy underneath what is being told is not an energy that is in alignment with, for me, which is important, which is harmony. It's very much like there's like, I mean, yeah, there's like ways that frequency and sound get used as a weapon against humanity that we are unaware of, and like subliminally, and like in ways that we don't even we can't consciously catch.
Yeah.
uh, Anything that you're taking in, like media, film, music, there's ways that sound frequencies are used to stir up emotional responses. And so it's important to like really um, be discerning about what you, just as people like are discerning of like the food they eat, like they want to eat,
Hmm.
I feel a lot of people want to eat organic, whole foods, like healthy, no preservatives. Like there's a big movement of people wanting to eat healthier because they realize that's important. It's the same thing of like what you're ingesting for your mind, for your heart, for your spirit, being conscious of those things. And also finding that balance of like how to stay informed. Like how is your body experiencing when you're getting information about something? Do you notice that you're like getting dysregulated? What does that mean? Emotional dysregulation. Do you notice that your heartbeat's starting to like grow fast? Do you notice that if your body temperature is changing? Like those are all signals that the nervous system's giving you that it's starting to get out of its its place of homeostasis. It's starting to get either ready for fight or ready for flight. And being aware of that, because that's like your almost first line of defense of like, oh, something's happening for me, like something's happening here. If you're able to take in information and stay grounded, then that's great. You have a bit more capacity than some other people do. If you're very quick to feeling that fight, flight, or freeze, then that's just telling you your nervous system has a smaller capacity to hold dysregulation. or stimulation. And so just noticing like for yourself um what works for you. Like if you're someone who gets easily dysregulated, it's probably a good idea to not take in the news and information to like a always being informed about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You might need it a little bit more filtered, like people telling you maybe third, fourth, fifth person separation, so it can be like received in a neutral state.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. For me, I'm one
uh,
of those people who completely checks out of anything on TV. It's like you mentioned, one of my purpose for talking about some of these concepts is because a lot of frequency manipulation, social energy manipulation happened at a mass scale. And it's to help
yeah,
people recognize these things. For me, I had to check out like when I'm watching anything on like a cable TV type thing, which has
yeah,
been like 10 years from now. It has a certain frequency that just does not resonate with me. It gives me like a
yeah,
feeling. So even if
yeah,
I'm sitting in someone's house and the TV is on, especially the news or something, it just has a certain frequency that just makes me feel uncomfortable.
yeah,
So I would have to check out even mentally or physically. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, like, and also it messes with your emotions and all of that. And
yeah,
I'm really careful about controlling my energy. Same
yeah,
can happen with social media. So I
yeah,
don't like to scroll too much. I minimize, especially certain ones like TikTok. I'm like, I can't even get
yeah.
myself to click
Oh
on
yeah,
it for a long time because even just how people talk and how people present themselves because the
yeah,
algorithm tells them to, and it's just like it disturbs my energy. Um,
yeah. I still have not downloaded TikTok for that reason
yeah,
because it's just too much. And then there's this aspect, right? So there's the one level of like noticing how you're filtering like what's happening, like as you take it in. Just as like you're eating, let's say if you're lactose intolerant and you don't know it, and you're eating cheese, and you're noticing like, oh, something's happening, like mapping a response,
yeah,
right? It's a little graphic, but whatever. It's the same thing of like when you're taking in like content, like how that's getting filtered. And then there's the aspect of like there is grief that needs to be tended to on the personal level, on the ancestral level, on a collective level that we all are plugged into. And it is important to make space for grief. Like it's scary, you know, in our society, I feel like I mean, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I know when I was younger, for example, and I would be crying, and then someone would be like, "Oh, stop crying!" Like, you know, you're okay. Like quickly shutting it down. Like,
yeah,
and me internalize the message that it's not okay for me to cry. I mean, unfortunately for them, that never worked because I still cried. but,
yeah,
but for some people, like that can really, you know, that stops a person's tears, and then they start
yeah,
having an imbalanced relationship with grief because then they've internalized that it's not okay for me to show my tears or it's not okay for me to feel sad or you know like all those things that we like subconsciously take in that then shut us off from being the fullness of who we are.
yeah,
And so there's like it feels like what's the word, there is like there's like a backlog of unfelt grief in our collective. And you know, gosh, it must have been like 3 or 4 years ago that in ceremony, spirit started to tell me um, that I needed to make space for grief. That there was an ocean of grief that like I need to make space for, not just for me, but like collectively to hold space for grief to be felt. And so I started doing ceremony, like grief ceremonies. There's a lot of great teachers and a lot of great books that are out there. One in particular, The Wild Edge of Sorrow by Francis Waller is a great book about grief and the importance of like making space for grief. And And I started doing those practices with people online, in person, and there's different ways to do it. There's different ceremonies and rituals that one can do. And, just it's important to feel the feelings.
Yeah.
I feel that there's like forums for the emotion code and like different healers, like on Facebook, there's different lot of like groups you can be plugged into. And you see people like, I just don't want to feel things anymore. They just like people are tired. Like, I get it. Like, I understand that. I've been in that place in my life where I'm like, I just don't want to feel these things anymore. It is awful. This sucks, like just feeling the exhaustion that it is to be living in this time. It is exhausting. But then I realized over the years that like, no, it's such a gift that we get to experience emotions, and that there's so much healing. Like what if we looked at, when we make space for grief, if we looked at that through the lens of like, oh, this isn't like me making space for my grief. Like this altar right here that you can see in the background, this is an altar I created in devotion to the ocean, like the ocean goddess and grief. This is all this altar here specifically is devoted to that. And so I make my offerings of like, I put water, I have like sweet essences, there's shells that I've collected in many different places. And this is a space where I physically have to anchor in to make space for grief. I've changed the way that I look at it. Instead of being like, this is the thing that I'm experiencing that's like painful, of looking at it through the lens of like, this is an offering I'm giving to the earth. This is an offering that I'm giving to my ancestors. This is an offering that I'm giving to the collective. That as my tears flow down, this is in devotion to the healing and transformation of grief. And when we like switch that, when it stops being like a like the energy of like and instead looking at it, this is just the way that I've chosen to do. If that resonates, great. If it doesn't, that's great too. But for me, it's been helpful to transform the way of like, oh, this is an offering. Like my tears are an offering to life, to allow for like to give myself permission to feel the grief that comes up when you're seeing a genocide happening, when you're seeing people get hurt, when you're feeling the death of someone that you love, when there a friendship has ended, when like there's so many different things that like can cause grief, and it's so important to feel that, because for me, what I've experienced over the years of actually making space for grief is that I feel that I've able to feel a deeper sense of joy and like a deeper sense of love, because love and grief go hand in hand. And so when we allow ourselves to really feel and express, like don't hold it in, but like actually express, allow it to go out and to be transformed. To be very clear, I'm not saying it to throw it at anyone. I'm not telling you to throw energy at people, but just like allow for the expression to flow. Our Earth Mother, she's such a great, if you ask for permission and like connect with like in a good way, you can ask for her support to hold, to transform. Like she's the ultimate transformer of energy. Whenever I do emotion code sessions with people, like this is not taught by the emotion code, but it's something that I've been taught from my other teachers and the elders that I've studied under. The importance of like grounding energy, connecting with guides, guardians, and well ancestors. There's a like a meditation I do in the beginning of anchoring into the earth and giving gratitude and asking for permission and asking for support. And I ask Mother Gaia, Pachamama, her many names that she has, that if she can help transform and transmute anything that gets released, utilizing her primordial forces of life and death, because she can alchemically transform anything that gets released and create new life and beauty like that. She's such an artist at doing that. Of like, you could see it like when we're composting scraps, and like the way that like the earth supports the like transformation of vegetables that are getting composted to be transformed into nutrients and like new life, essentially. She does that. Like there's a physical example of that, but energetically, she's just like, she's our mother. Like, she can do that for us if we ask for her support in that way. And in the same way, so many earth-based spiritual practices and rituals, you know, when you're transforming energy, for transforming emotions, transforming trauma, you can ask the earth if she wants the support in that transformation. And I guarantee you'll have a great response and great support coming back to you of like, yes, I'm here for you. I'm here for this transformation because I feel that as we transform, we support her. And as she transforms, it ripples and supports the collective. And so
Mhm.
there's some power in that.
Yeah, it's very important to feel your feelings instead
Yeah.
of, and then it piles up, then you have a crazy reaction. But there is a lot of pressure in society
Mm,
nowadays to kind of, oh, forget your feelings or it's a bad thing to actually feel. I love feeling my feelings so I can transmute it, or else it's just stuck energy in your body that keeps piling up and you have to go
yeah.
see a therapist to work it out for a while.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
crying has been like, I am a crier, and there is stigma around
And
that. It's like, I've had somebody say, "You still cry?" I'm like, "Yeah, there's nothing better. I feel so freaking amazing after I cry. I'm like, oh, this feels amazing. There's nothing like it to wash away your emotions. Or else, again, you're still keeping it stuck there
uh,
and you're not feeling your feelings. There's these fuck your
uh,
feelings people, and I'm like, no, that's just being an avoidant and avoiding, you know, kind of brushing it off. You have to feel it in order to transmute it.
yeah.
And I've just, after a
Yeah.
while, you get better at it and you actually enjoy it. I can feel into the deepest feeling that I have and just go to the depths of it, even if it's really dark, even if it's sad. And when you
Hmm.
do that enough times, you get used to it and become more
Yeah.
desensitized. And then that helps you transmute it, honestly. I can't do the hide my feelings.
And like think about like how much like artists and like musicians who've created things from their
Exactly.
feeling.
Yeah.
Like there's such beautiful uh like that's a beautiful example of how one can feel deeply and then like
Mhm.
transform it into creating something beautiful
Yeah.
that can impact people and can maybe support their process of feeling their feelings. Like it's
Yeah.
a ripple effect. Yeah.
When you're dealing with something like grief, I know you help people with strong energy like grief and loss. Some people tend to, how do you even recognize? Because some people's idea of dealing with it is to say, oh, I'm fine, or there's pressure to kind of rush the process, the grieving process. How do you recognize that you're in grief and not in denial of what you're feeling
Like how do I recognize for me personally or how do I recognize in another person?
in another person?
Two different things.
Yeah, I guess I'm asking both too. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, let's see, which one to answer first?
It,
So
well,
in another person, um discernment is really important, right? Like understanding what feels like for me, again, it's a very physical feeling of like when something feels true, when something feels false. Like I have like a visceral reaction to that. So if I'm talking to someone, not even like working with someone, if I'm just talking with someone and I was like, "Oh, how you doing?" They're like, "Oh, I'm good." I'm asking about like let's say there was a loss. And I'm like, "Oh, how are you doing with everything?" Like, "Oh, I'm fine." I'll like pause for a second because there's like there's a consent is important. Sometimes there's a time and place for when a person wants to can feel safe enough to be seen, you know?
yeah.
Let's just assume for this example that this person's like feels safe and is okay with I'll ask questions. I'll just be curious. And I feel that that's the way like one can create safety to allow for someone to go further. Um, an example is so my mom and I have a lot of like deep conversations. And so, especially like the longer I've been doing my own healing work, and then it's rippled, even though she may not have personally done her own healing work to the same extent, just because the fact that I'm a part of the cosmology that is the family unit, it's going to ripple, right? So we'll have conversations about like, she may share something that's like happening in her life, um, and I'll ask her questions. Like I have consent there. There's consent built into the relationship.
Yeah.
And I may ask her, I'm like, oh, do you want to like explore this? I'll ask her that question, even though consent is already built in the relationship. And she can say yes or no. I'm not attached to that. So, she says yes, and then I'll ask her, I'm like, oh, what's coming up for you around this experience that you're having? Like, what is it reminding you of? Like, and I'll just ask her those questions because we can get stuck in the story of like the thing that's happening, right in this moment. And then sometimes what happens is that emotions come up to the surface. And the next thing she knows, like she's talking about something that looks pretty mundane and like surface level, and then realizing like, oh, there's actually grief here. I may not have known that there was grief there. I may have like a little bit of an inkling that there might be just because I know her. But next thing you know, she's crying and the tears are coming up to the surface. And just like I'm not trying to fix that. I don't take the stance of like, oh, I'm gonna take this away for you or like cure you or save you from it. And just being like, yeah, there's grief coming here. And I very much have the stance of like your grief can come up to the surface and be seen. You're safe here. I also don't feel I feel like just because you have consent from a person to explore something doesn't mean you should like keep bulldozing, because then I'll notice when like the energy pulls away of like it's like subconsciously saying like, okay, that's enough. And I'll ask them like, oh, is this enough? Like, is this? And then like, yeah. I was like, okay, cool. And then we'll change the subject and go into something else. Because sometimes everyone has different capacity for like how much they're willing to feel in a moment. And I find for me, like I just don't believe in the like keep going, keep feeling your feelings,
Yeah.
like that is like really traumatizing. That can be really traumatizing for a person. So it's just a very subtle like it's a subtle way of being with another.
Yeah.
And um for me like I'm very clear of like I'm not trying to save you from something.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think when I was younger, I used to think like therapists, healers, like they heal the person, like they do the heavy lifting. And now I realize I'm like that is so not the case. That's like not even the realm of, not even the same dimension. Like a healer is holding space for healing. Is a person who's working on their own healing that allows for them to have a capacity to hold, which like sounds so, I feel like people say like I'm gonna hold space, like I've seen like comedic sketches of like I'm holding space for you, oh I'm holding space for you, like what does that mean? I feel it's like I'm willing to be with you in whatever you're experiencing, and I hope that my being with you allows for you to feel that you can be with me. And maybe that being looks like you crying. Or maybe that being looks like you being angry about something. And maybe this is the first time that you're allowing yourself to be in that experience while being witnessed by someone else who's not trying to do anything for you, but simply be with you. That's like when that term of like holding space, that's what it feels like for me. Of like, can I be with this other person in whatever is coming up for them? And perhaps some that may look like me asking questions to invite that person to be deeper with themselves in this like dynamic that we're creating together. And then as far as like grief for me, sometimes like I mean, I'm an emotional being. Um sometimes it kind of like comes out of nowhere. I'm like, oh, snap. I'm having feelings about a thing. And then, I've had many experiences. Like I laugh a lot and I smile a lot, but I've had experiences I'll be like laughing and the next second I'm crying. And I'm like, what just happened? Like,
Yeah.
where did that come from? Because I may not consciously know that behind that like laughter or whatever, that there's actually like tears.
Mm.
Sometimes I can be like pissed as all heck and like just be like angry about something. And then the next moment I realize like, oh, the anger was just like the first level. Behind that was a whole well of grief. And like, I used to get mad when I'd get really angry, I'd start crying. And I used to get so mad about that, like another level of mad on top of already being angry. Because I felt like when I was younger, I think like tears while you're angry means like weakness and like takes away from your anger. And then I realized I'm like, oh no, anger is like that. Anger is the first one who shows up. But sometimes there's usually always something behind the anger. And the anger is just kind of like the bodyguard who like got first to the scene and is like, punching like blah, blah, blah. And then behind it is like grief or whatever it may be. Um, so for me personally to notice when there is grief there, it looks differently all the time.
I've had one of those situations where I felt this deep emotion of sadness and I was crying. And then all of a sudden, 5 minutes later, it just like left my body. Like that whole
Mhm.
thing just disappeared. And I was like laughing like crazy. And I'm like,
Yeah,
what just happened? And it happened another time. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is me just alchemizing the thing. It comes and goes and letting it out because I was able
yeah,
to go into the depths of it, feel it, without giving
yeah,
myself holding space for me and my feelings. But when it comes to grief, I think the most important thing is to hold that space without pressuring someone, without rushing someone, because everybody handles
yeah,
grief differently. And not everyone cares to hold space for people. And not just during
yeah,
grief, but just to even be a empathic listener or whatever you want to call it, just holding space
yeah,
for people because I used to think it was just a simple thing, but I realized sometimes I do want people to do that for me, and people don't have the
yeah,
patience to do that. And so I'm like, okay, this is a skill. Like, being able, having the patience and having the empathy and the care to actually be a safe space for people.
yeah. People get deeply uncomfortable
Yeah.
um, around when it happens. It's just like, and I think that's like such a good indicator of like your capacity to uh, make space for your own personal healing. Like a person who may be uncomfortable when someone else is having an emotional expression, I would wager to say that's a person who doesn't make space for their own emotional expressions. And so like how could you show up for someone if you're not even showing up for yourself? Because I feel that's like first and foremost, you have to be able to show up for yourself. And whatever, subconscious stories or programs or whatever it may be that's blocking you from being able to show up for yourself, of course it's going to show up in another person. Like why wouldn't it? And that example you just gave of like how you were feeling like you were crying, crying, and crying, and then suddenly like you're just like finished and just like, oh, I'm done. Like
No,
I've
I felt the whole energy
it
just
made me think
leave
of
my
this like
body. It was the craziest
yeah,
experience because this is the
yeah.
first
It was
time it
like
happened,
complete.
but it happens often now. I'm desensitized to
Yeah,
it. And that's when I realized,
yeah.
okay, I'm
It
alchemizing it.
yeah. It makes me think of like I had this experience where like I was in love with this guy and I had an experience of like heartbreak and it was really painful, really, really painful. And I don't know, this is something I've done since I was younger. Whenever I would get heartbroken by a guy, like I would listen to music and like music would help me, like music would hold space for me feeling
Yeah.
my feelings. And I just remember I was cleaning, like deep cleaning the house like sobbing, sobbing, sobbing. Had the music blasting, like I had the space to myself. I was living with housemates at the time, and no one was home for the weekend. And I just felt my feelings, like I sang them. I was like just allowing it to go out, cleaning, cleaning, cleaning. Like so, I was like physically like invigorated while allowing for my emotions to like come through, and listening to music. And there was just like this thing that I did for myself until like it was just like complete. And then I remember like friends of mine who knew what was happening, like, "Are you okay?" Like, I was like, "I'm good." They're like, "Wait, really? Like, you're good?" I was like, "No, I'm good." Like, I allowed myself this space to go feel my feelings until there was literally nothing left. Like, it was complete. And now I'm like, truly, like, I feel good. I'm good. I can move forward from this. And I think that's like something that we can do for ourselves is to like, I feel like the biggest gift is to allow that, like really dig in deep and just allow it to flow through.
That's crazy because that's the exact situation. I was heartbroken and I was like, I was crying and it was like a 5 minute situation. It wasn't a whole day thing. And then it just, I didn't even have control over it. It just left. It was like an energy that left. And
Yeah.
I was done with it. I wasn't even feeling, I can't even bring myself to feel what I just felt 5 minutes ago. It's like it's gone, it's done.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
wow. But then I have had situations where I was angry about something and same thing
Yeah.
happened. It just left.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, I was not done with that. So and then you realize, okay, you're addicted to feeling certain feelings. And that's why you
Yeah.
hold on. And I'm like, wait, I
Yeah.
wasn't done being angry about that, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
left. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't even have control over alchemizing my feelings. Like, what is this? So, I got used to it after a while, but that moment of the anger one made me realize, okay, we get addicted to some of these
Yeah.
feelings and we sit
Yeah.
in them and we mull over it. And that could be dangerous for your emotional and your physical body.
It is. Yeah. That's a thing that actually like comes up like are you addicted to suffering?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And also like do you believe that it's possible to heal?
Mm. Yeah. Because you could be sabotaging your own healing because you still want to sit in that anger or
Yeah.
resentment or whatever it is. And I think that's
Yeah.
what keeps some people
Yeah.
stuck.
Sometimes like yeah, yeah. Because sometimes we get attached to like I am I, like my understanding of who I am is based off of my anger that I feel about this experience that I had. Like we get really attached to like identifying with this particular part of ourselves. That's why like when I learned about parts work, it made sense to me because it felt like a way to reclaim my re, like you can reclaim your sovereignty and also to like transform those different wounded parts because you could like I've seen it so many times of like people just really I know who I am like they're not saying this obviously but like what's basically coming up is like I know who I am based off of like my mother did this to me and I'm angry and I have resentment and like this like just really being fully attached to that like identity and that identity or that like wound has informed the way that they walk in the world that they like build relationships like everything gets like formed around this identity that was formed from a wound and so like the idea of like being different is like doesn't make any sense because they've created this whole um, sense of who they are around this particular thing
Mm.
you know and like that idea of like forgiveness or like compassion is like no absolutely like full body rejection of that because this is who I am and for some people like you know um nothing can be more frustrating than like seeing someone who's like really stuck in their story and you're just like but you're
Mm.
more than that and they're just like no then you just have to kind of like all right this is what you're choosing for yourself
Yeah.
and being the person who's an empath realizing like okay I have to have a boundary around this because this can be toxic as a person who's deep feeling and seeing that you're just stuck in your story and there's like a rigidity there,
Yeah.
then realizing like if I continue to be in a relationship with this rigidity, this is going to like muddle the waters that I'm existing in, like for my heart, because I'm deeply feeling. And so I need to like either the boundary can be like, okay, maybe this is not a relationship that's good to like continue with, or being like very clear of like when I'm with this person energetically, I just can't take on their stuff because that's like I have to consciously realize that like I'm never going to change this for them, and anything that's pulling in me to want to do that for them or to want to hold space for them, just realize I'm like, don't do that. This is gonna create toxic patterns between me and this person who's like stuck in their rigidity.
Mhm. And
Does
it's
that make
hard
sense?
yeah. And it's kind of hard as sometimes as an empath, you feel your energy draining, and then you realize when you leave the space, all of a sudden you're re-energized. It happened to me a couple of
Mm-hmm.
times before I realized, oh, I'm being drained in a way, by these
Yeah,
energies.
yeah.
Um, what part do you feel, rituals and ceremonies, what part do they play in helping you process something like grief or loss?
Um, they play a really big part, and also because when you're looking through the lens, so like that that example I was just showing was just looking at it through the lens of like what we may call like psychology, right?
Mm,
But then when you look at the lens of like spirituality and frequency and like energies,
mm,
there is something there are different energies that have a different vibrational frequency that get attached to when we're in these like lower vibrational states of being. So that example of a person who's like in that rigidity, they're gonna have like entities attached to their being because those energies they get their sustenance from those lower vibrational energies. And so like in the space of like ritual and ceremony, understanding that like those things are going to come up in the space. So like how do you create protection for the space if you're going to like consciously be creating a role for the earth, for example, and holding space for grief, you have to have like not just you but also a good idea to have helpers who also understand this, of like the different layers of what's happening in the space. You got the like very human layer, you got the emotional layer, you have the energetic spiritual layer, and having that like okay, this is the boundaries that we're going to create, this is the tools that we're going to use to create protection for the space, this is the way that we're going to stay in integrity with what we're doing with our purpose. You know, if you're going to use the element of fire, for example, to transmute, like having someone who understands the spirit of fire and like is a fire tender and understands that like being a fire tender, like there's great integrity that's needed to be a person who is tending to fire. And then when you're tending to fire in the space of communal healing in a ritual or ceremony, realizing that like as things come up to be transmuted in the people's expression, like a person could be like expressing emotions, for example, the fire tender needs to be focused on the fire. They can't get distracted by like all the stuff that's happening in this space with the community because the fire is going to tell you, you know, I've tended fire, so this is why I'm using
mm.
this language. But when
Gotcha.
you're using the fire, like the fire will show you things. The fire will um, express to you when offerings need to be made. And so, like in the um, lineage that I've been trained in, withholding ritual and ceremony, like it's a lineage that does offerings. So you'll have like there might be like libations, there may be like food, there may be like things that people created like crafts that people created with the intention of offering. There may be flowers that, you know, there's a lot of different physical things that can be offered that aren't just physical things. There's like an energy behind it. It's looking at the um, like the mana of the thing, the what's
Mm.
that word I'm looking for? Like
The
the spiritual
chi, the
energy behind it.
energy. Yeah.
The chi, yeah, yeah, exactly. And so, um, because there's many traditions around the world that use these type of things, foods and libations and stuff like that as offerings. So it's uh, the fire tender is paying attention to when the fire needs offerings, when when grandfather fire is saying like offerings need to be made, and they'll either make the offerings or ask people to make offerings to the fire to help continue to support the communal energy, like the energy of what's being transformed in this space. And that's like, you know um, what's the word I'm looking, like quantum leaps can happen in ritual and ceremony. That you can be in that it's like the space outside of time and space. Um, that's what I've experienced with ceremonies. Like I've been in ceremonies that may be just like from sunset to sunrise that have felt like years have gone by. You're just like, well, what just happened? Like time just stopped and we like bent it and like stretched it out. It's just like a lot just happened and it feels like years have gone by, but it's just been a night. And I think that's like that ritual and ceremony allow for people to like enter into the quantum field in a lens that's not like very, it's not a mental space. It's not like oh, I'm gonna enter into the quantum field. Like that's not what you're thinking. It's like the alchemical process that we've created. Our ancestors have been doing this. Like it's just the thing that humanity has done over the years that allows for the um bypassing the structures that like we live in like the mundane world. It's just like you're just entering into a space um that exists outside of the rules that we exist in on a day-to-day basis.
Well, Natalie, this has been a very interesting conversation. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with before I close it out?
I guess I just would like to invite anyone who's listening to this or felt resonant um, with what I was sharing, especially with that last bit about ceremony and ritual. Um, Liv Wheeler and I are collaborating in this training called Daughters of the Milky Way. It's a priestess training, and it's for women who feel inspired to explore these themes that we've been talking about, these ways of being, um, and being in ritual and ceremony together. It starts in August. We're still receiving applications till July, and if you feel called to explore more, you can go to the Earth's Amulet website and learn about the priestess training there. We're going to be meeting online and in person for a week in Mexico in December. So if anyone feels called, yeah, you're welcome to join us.
That sounds awesome. And for the listeners, I'll have her information in the description. Thank you, Natalie, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you, Luam. It's been an awesome conversation with you.